Yeah, so we're very briefly going to just mention Solve a Clue. And if anybody has had a go at Solve a Clue and they'd like to talk about that, there'll be a little bit of opportunity there. And then we're going to talk for the rest of the time about Key 4, which is Step into History, which, as we discovered this morning, is quite a long one. With It's quite involved. So the majority of this meeting will be taken up with talking about Key 4, Step into History. There we go. That's just what I've just said. So here is the example that one of the teachers actually, Viv, you talk about this because this is somebody that you know in New Zealand, isn't it? So
Yeah, well, it was just that when Tim and I were traveling around New Zealand, oh no, I think it was when I was there up there on my own. One of the teachers said, "Oh, I used Solve a Clue," and she presented this to her students. This image that's currently on the screen, very interesting and strange, wouldn't you say? What in just give me one or two words of what it makes you think about or what you notice about it.
Snow, ice.
Snow and ice, right? That's where it takes you, Dana. Yeah.
Climbing,
What was that, Ulysses?
climbing a mountain.
Right. Yeah. So you recognise it. And sure enough, it was to launch an inquiry into the story of Sir Edmund Hillary and Sherpa Tenzing and their ascent of Everest. The children didn't necessarily make those associations, not being from parts of New Zealand that have snowy mountains. So their initial associations were quite sort of gory, to do with, weaponry and nasty deaths and things. But that was okay. She allowed that, and then she sort of brought in more clues that led children down that track. And as I mentioned briefly this morning, the lens of going in through the equipment, the clue being the equipment, meant that when they did the inquiry about the ascent of Everest, they were very fascinated by all the equipment. So it sort of set the tone, if you know what I mean. So there you are.
So if you go to the website, the Try This website, I don't know if people know about this already. There is a link. Let me share this part of the screen with you. Can you see that now? Can you see that web page?
Yeah.
So this one, you get to it through the resources link here. And if you go down to teacher planning, it opens this page. And then if you click on where it says this link, then it opens up. And oh, it's Diane coming in.
Oh.
Well, slowly and gradually, it opens up another page.
When you're not on Zoom, it's a bit quicker.
When you're not on Zoom, it hopefully goes a bit quicker. But on here is examples of teachers who have used the keys. And I say it's not working terribly well because we're trying to stretch my bandwidth too thin. But they're on there. There we go. Are various examples that people have done using the keys. So just to sort of signpost that really and say that on there are some examples of different things that people have been doing. And if people would like to, oh, you go, Ulysses, there's one of yours there.
Ulysses is one, yeah.
So if people, hi Diane, hi.
Yeah.
So if people would like to contribute to the page and put some stuff on there, there's a link on the resources page where you can contact us, and then we have that stuff uploaded onto there. So we'll go back to the slideshow again. Okay. So the key that we're going to look at is key 4, which is, as you know, step into history. And we're going to look at the example that that deals with children working in the coal mines of Britain in the 19th century. Now, the pictures and other resources that are attached to this inquiry are also available on the website. So if you go to the resources section, you'll see key examples, and on there you can find the pictures and the other resources that we're going to be using. So the first step in this key is to use an image, and there are a number of pictures that are very easily accessible through Google Image, and this is the one that a teacher in Lisa's school. Lisa works in a school in Manchester called Christ the King, and it was week before last, wasn't it? I'm getting confused with when we were there, but the week before last, there was a teacher there who was using this key, and there's some photographs later on in this slideshow that you'll be able to see of her class working. And she was using this key, and she used this picture, this engraving, as the first step. So children were sitting on the carpet. She put this up and she said, "I'd like to show you a picture. It's a print made nearly 200 years ago." So what we're basically going to do is run through the sequence as it is with the key. And here's the first image. So I'll invite you to do what her students did, and just to have a look at this image and what it is that you notice, what it is that jumps out at you, and to share that with us if you see something on there that you'd like to talk about. I'll give you a minute or two. It's quite interesting, this, Viv, because what happened in Sarah's class was that there was this silence. And she'd sort of said to them, just look at it in silence for a minute or two. And that's the same that's just happened to us, isn't it? It's a sort of it's a shocking image, isn't it, really? It really is quite.
Yeah. And in the silence, you do find yourself really looking at details.
So what sort of things are you picking up?
I don't mind breaking the ice. I'll break the ice. I've just noticed for the first time, which I didn't notice the other day, how muscular the bodies are.
I'm also noticing on the right-hand side behind that door, it looks like there's another tunnel going on and someone pushing right on that very far side.
Yeah.
I can't work out if it's a door leading into another tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what it is. So I think there's a tunnel on both sides, actually. There's one on the left-hand side, and you can see some kind of cart at the end of the tunnel, and then there's another one on the right side. So it's a bit of a labyrinth, I suppose, of tunnels going off in different directions. So one of the things that was discussed in class, these were year 3. So they're, Lisa, help me out here. They're 6, 7, is that right? No, 7 or 8 year olds. And one of the conversations was around whether it was cold down in the mine or whether it was hot. And there was some discussion about whether it was hot at different times and cold at other times. So in actual fact, you can see here that the people are kind of stripped really down to their underclothes, and that was mainly because down there it was intensely hot, so they would strip their clothes off just to try and reduce in some way the heat that they were suffering. So that's the first slide. So this is the next part of the key is to read out a piece of text that you prepared in advance that gives the students a little bit of a background after they've had that initial image. So conditions in the mines were terrible. Children as young as 7 were expected to work 12-hour shifts, often in complete darkness, without any regard for their safety. Some of the children worked as trappers, opening and closing doors to let air through the tunnels. Others worked as drawers, dragging heavy carts along the tunnels with chains around their waists. Others dug coal using picks and shovels. So here in this picture, we've got a trapper. So the job of the trappers, and these were often very young children, was to sit crouched up next to the doors, and the doors were put there to control the airflow for various reasons, gas and other kinds of things. And the trapper's job was to wait, often in the dark, and they would be there. Often their shifts were as long as 12 hours, and they would sit. You can see the trapper here, waiting for the coal cart to come along, pulled by the drawers, or pushed by the drawers in this circumstance, and then they would open the door and the cart would go through. And the cart on the front here, you can see there's a candle burning on the front of the cart. So you can imagine a trapper sitting in the dark. And of course, the children who are in this class are the same age as this child depicted in this picture. And they see the light coming up and around the corner and hear the wheels as it sort of trundled along. And then they'd stand up, pull open the door, push themselves up against the wall of the mine, and then the cart would trundle through, and then they'd close the door behind them, and then they'd be left in darkness. And this was absolutely riveting for the kids. They were
Yeah.
staring intently at this picture, and you could see their minds, trying to make some sense out of this.
I was wondering, Tim, if I might jump in like you did
Sure.
with me earlier and just deconstruct that what happened there, because it's interesting watching from here and thinking about what happened with the children. I don't know if others agree, but there's something very compelling about an image with children in it. So even if you weren't going to teach coal mines, some kind of a nice collection of history photos that have children in it, that is a point of connection for our younger people, isn't it? And I was very struck by the silence in that classroom, and Tim and I both talked about this. The teacher really trusted her storytelling instincts, and she trusted the picture and her words to get things across more than a discussion. So when she asked the children just to start writing notes on what they thought they thought of all this, they wrote and wrote and wrote, and one of them wrote, I think these children would be in the depths of despair, which is so poetic. Year two, eh? So yeah, I think the starting with an image, we don't always have to start with an image, but a really compelling image, and particularly if that image has got children in it, because if you think about it, if they were adults, there would be much less for them to connect to. And then trusting the storytelling and the details to entrap them or hook them or draw them in. Yeah.
And the other thing is this thing around curiosity. A lot of the way the keys work, and this one in particular, is to not tell the whole story at once, but just to kind of lead them in and leave things unanswered for a while. And the human mind is naturally curious and wants things, wants answers to things, and looks for the space and the gaps in things. So the way that this key works is it gradually reveals more as you're going in. So you're starting off with a picture, and then you get a piece of text with some explanation in it, and then, well, you'll see, and then you get this. So this is from, well, I won't explain it to you. Just have a look at this. Just give yourself a minute or two just to read through what this is, and anything that you would like to point out.
And everybody's being very polite and staying muted, but this is a good time to unmute and throw your
Yeah,
thoughts.
join in. Yeah.
The first thing that jumps out at me is that for the Joshua Stansfield, deceased not very sharp.
Right.
Is that talking about his intelligence level? I don't know. I don't know if that's talking about him not being very sharp, but
Kind of implies it, doesn't it?
yeah.
Bit of victim blaming there, do you think, Lisa?
A little bit, yeah. There's not much detail.
No. Well, no, there's not much detail in any of them, is there? There's
Mm.
just a line, really, or a couple of lines.
I think with the shift of blame as well, a lot of them are accidental, unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that accidental word popping up an awful lot, and then at the end, ditto, ditto. Is that
Oh, I
just-
know, like they couldn't be bothered to write it again. Oh, it's just another kid that's fallen down the shaft. Ditto, ditto.
Yeah.
Oh, terrible.
Move on.
I don't know what a corv is.
A corv.
Mm.
I think a corv is one of those trucks that we saw the coal being pushed along. I think that's what a corv is. So if it was ascending, it's something that carries the coal. So if it's ascending up the shaft, it looks like it something fell, or he fell. Looks like he was going up in the corv, doesn't it? And then poor old James tumbled out of it. Yeah.
Well, poor young James.
Well, poor young James, yes. Very much young, 9. Yeah.
I just noticed looking at the dates, the timeline is accidents all the time, or incidents, and also the age of the children. That's really, really young, 8 years old.
Yeah. It's the ditto bit, as Viv said, seems to imply that this is a common occurrence, and the dates underline that, don't they? It's happening every week. Sometimes.
And I like Amy's
one day
point
to the
that,
next.
if you choose to write accidental, you're suggesting that there are rules and things to be followed, and that, oh, well, this was an accident. So something aside from what should happen happened, in a way. It doesn't sound like a health and safety expert going in saying preventable fall, or how can we change things for the future, does it?
I don't think many people's learning from this. I don't think there's inquiries going on.
In fact, one of them even says contrary to rules.
Right. Which again it feels a little bit like putting the blame on the victim rather than the people who are responsible for their safety. I mean, is anyone responsible for their safety is the question, isn't it? Feels like it's no one's taking the blame for this. No one's sort of accepting that they're the person who should be keeping people safe.
It's awful.
So again, this is just to continue with the pointing out the strategy here. This is another set of information that opens this context up, this inquiry up, through the principle of show not tell.
And through the symbolic. So we had the iconic in the first picture with imagery, and now we've gone to data and words that kind of layer another mode of meaning making on the previous one. So a second picture wouldn't have given us as much of a change as going to the data.
So
For me,
oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
No, just personally, because I work in Yorkshire. All those names are local names to me, and I'm working in Bowling Park Primary at the moment, and with the exception of Willesden, I know all those places.
Gosh, wow. Right. That's, yeah.
It would have such impact for children there to see this, wouldn't it?
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're all Yorkshire minds, are they?
all
Mm.
those places are around here. Yeah.
And what sort of distance would you say they are? You know, what's the radius of distance that we're having this kind of accident?
Only 25, 35 miles, something like that. Yeah. So a map of that would be easy to do, wouldn't it?
Would.
Wow. Wow. And the size of the places, are they villages or a bit bigger
Yeah,
than that?
they sure are. They certainly would have been in 1839. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And I've always assumed that at that time most of the families, their main income would have been from the
Mining. Mm.
yeah, yeah. Because one of the things that that often comes out of this context, this inquiry, is why parents would send their young children down into the mines, and what was that about? Why were they doing that? Um, and you know,
It's reading around it. It's what they did.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
What they did. That
yeah.
was the normal thing.
And that
Mm.
had been done from one generation to the next for as long as people could remember.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's this is the next step.
So
So
we've gone from, you know, from attraction and interest to more of a sense of investment and a little bit of, I guess, I'm a little bit outraged or, you know, care, concerned. So we're moving along Dorothy Heathcote's continuum of engagement as well, or aiming to, yeah.
right.
Sorry,
And
Dan.
this step is the step into the history. It's why it's called Step into History, because in this step, the task that the children have been asked to work on is to imagine if they were somebody who was working in a place like this, if they were. So it says, could I ask you to imagine for a moment what it might have been like for these children? What sounds they might have heard? What thoughts might have passed through their minds? What they imagined in the long hours, often alone in the dark. So it's the empathy, the trying to put yourself into the shoes of somebody and to imagine that circumstance. And that was quite a profound experience for those children.
Mm.
You say that they, you know, they'd been sitting there in silence, and that was something that the teacher had asked them to do, not as an imposition, and I don't think they felt it as an imposition, but rather as almost like a sign of respect, or just a sort of just to be quiet and just to think and ponder on this. And then this step, you could see them really thinking about the fact, and I think this was again one of the reasons why this picture and this context, because they're the same age, they're thinking they're sitting in a classroom and, you know, the daylight and, you know,
Yeah. There's a lot of solemnity, and this was the point at which the depths of despair
right.
statement was made. Do you think we might give people here a chance to do that, just so we can
We'll
hear the
do
kind
this.
of
This is
words?
step 4. So this was
Yeah.
when the bit of
Okay.
writing happened. So if you've got if you can lay your hands on a pencil or a pen or on a piece of paper, just something to write on. I'm just going to ask you to write down what comes into your mind as if you were a child in the mine. So, for example, you might write something like, as I sit here all alone in the dark, I can hear the chip, chip, chip of pickaxes and the rattle of chains. So, yeah, so just to write a sentence or two as if you were somebody, one of these children working in the mine. I'll give you a moment or two to work on that. Okay, when you just finish that little bit. So often what I do is I'll give children a piece of paper this size, so it's A5. I don't know about you, John, but I find this, it's non-threatening, this, isn't it? It's just a little bit of paper, so it's great, I think, for kids who just to, because you don't want reams and reams, you don't want loads and loads, but you also don't want it to be such a big piece of paper. You get a piece of A4, it's like such a lot to fill, isn't it? Whereas if you got a little bit like this, yeah, you're nodding, so I'm guessing you're agreeing, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I chose to do that same size myself.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It's just funny. I was just talking with a colleague, and starting the year, I've just brought the kids all like a
Great.
little notebook, and we were doing some writing. And many of my new students have got quite a negative mindset towards writing. And at the end of the week, we kind of had our portafeta, like our circle time and feedback, and they all were really excited about writing. And I think it was because of the non-threatening,
Yeah.
you know, that in their heads they're all successful because they had written
right
a full page, you know. So
Yeah.
I think they're really excited about writing in a small notebook, which kind of makes me laugh a wee bit.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I do it routinely now, but I find it's almost the ideal size, because it gets brevity and forces those children to be concise, or people to be concise, but also it allows people the security of not having to fill up a great big page. So I'm just going to remind myself what the next step is. Yes. So the next step is to so I'll just jump onto here. Okay. So what sort of things were coming to people in their writing? What sorts of would anybody be prepared to sort of read out something that they've written? Yeah, Ulysses?
It's so humid here. I hate it when it gets like this. I don't know how much it's led for me to get out of here. Great, another card.
Yeah. So it's almost like a stream of consciousness, that, isn't it? It's like you're thinking to yourself. It's not a record of something. You're thinking back. You're actually there, aren't you? Present at that moment. Fantastic. Anybody else?
I'll go.
Thanks, Amy.
I put, in this dim mind, I can hear my thoughts echoing louder than the distant cries of child labour. Alone in the shadows, I sit dreaming of the sunlight.
Right. So
reminds me of your kids' writing, Amy. It's so lovely. That's a compliment.
Yeah. One more.
I just wrote dark, gloom, hunger, waiting for the light, shiver, silence.
Yeah.
Drip, drip, drip. Clunk, 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 clunk.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's great, because we've got 3 very different interpretations of that, haven't we? Yours almost like a poem, Diane. It's like a soundscape, isn't it? Yeah. So this was when, as Viv says, this is when one of the children in Sarah's class had written "The Depths of Despair," and that we wrote that up on the board because that almost became, like the title of this story that we're exploring here. The depths being the depths of a mine, but also, of course, the depths of people's feelings of desperation. So
And can I ask you before we move on, can you feel
Yeah.
the shift inside yourself having done the writing? Can you feel the shift from hearing about this key to now being in it and invested in caring about it? Because I definitely can. And I think as teachers, yeah, we can talk about these things, but when we do it is when we feel what the children feel. Yeah. And I've watched this key be taught about 3 times, and that's the first time I've done the writing, and I had a different experience again. So thank you.
It is different, isn't it? If you're,
Mm-hmm.
as you say, you've watched it, but actually participating in it. And I think that's another thing that, you know, as teachers, yeah, sometimes perhaps we miss that. This is maybe a thought I'm having now, is that how different it is to be participating in it.
Empathy is not an idea. It's chemicals in your body that come up from experiences that you have. You know, I've watched this a number of times, and in fact, the time I did participate with you with the Newcastle students, Tim, do you remember I couldn't do anything because I was just so irate and upset and in it with the children. But I hadn't done any writing, and the writing again. I just want to say, you know, you feel something completely different again when you actually write as the person. Yeah, I'm deeper in it. Excuse the pun this time.
Right. Well, sorry, John, go.
Just to say, I've seen lots of teachers writing at the same time as the children writing, you know, that taking the activity and demonstrating that I can be a writer as well as a teacher in the same way that you can be a writer. And I think that's quite a powerful strategy to use about, you know, equality in the room and so on.
Yeah. Like that, John. And that's going to encourage you to give it longer too, isn't it? Give it the time it needs.
And the whole thing about not walking around the room and looking over people's shoulders when they write.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. No, I think that's crucial, actually, isn't it? As you say, the last thing you want to do is have someone looking over your shoulder while you're writing, and that's true if you're a child as if you're an adult, isn't it? It's just the same thing, really. I was going to say something there, and I've completely forgotten it. Oh, it was again just to go back really to the thing about this step being this key being that you're stepping into this world, that you're in your imagination, you're now through this activity you're asked to think about it from your point of view, as if you were somebody in this situation at this point in history, and we'll come back to it when we talk about the strengths of this key. So this step 7 is a movement into the enactive. So far we've used iconic and symbolic. We're skirting around the dramatic imagination, and in the language that you were using, there was darkness and light, sound and silence, and movement and stillness. But this next step is the enactive. So it's asking the children really now to take on the situation, as it were, of these children. So it starts with, can I ask you, working in small groups, to step into this time and create more images like the one on the board. So this image, I'll explain to the children, is what's called an engraving. It's not a photograph. Photography really wasn't an option at this period in time, and certainly not down the mine. So this was created by an artist and was as an engraving, and then printed and often appeared in newspapers and journals and reports. So the convention that we're going to use is the convention of a still image done as if it was an engraving. So showing what it was like for children working in the mines. It might be children working at the coalface, or opening and closing the heavy wooden doors, or traveling down into the pit on the shaky lift. So at this point, the children are up on their feet, and they're talking to each other in groups about what's going to be happening in their part of the mine, as it were. And one of the things that I've learned really is to, again, I think, John, this comes back to your point about just being just mindful and giving time to things, letting things develop and not be too directive. And one of the hardest things as a teacher is to stand back, isn't it? One of the hardest things is to just literally do nothing. Or even though standing back, of course, is doing something, but it's a deliberate policy of just standing back and just letting things happen. And with children of all ages, really, but particularly young children, they'll start playing at being in the mine. You know, they'll be on their hands and knees. Some of them, they'll be crawling along. Some of them will be on their backs. Some of them will get injured, and they'll be, you know, and there'll be a lot of movement and noise. And the convention itself isn't been applied just yet, but it's coming. It's coming. So, but they're generating ideas and working together and involving themselves in the context. And then, then the idea is to apply the convention. So normally I do it with a signal. I say 3, 2, 1, and that will be the signal for everybody to be in the engraving. And that's the point at which I'll say to them, of course, still images, engravings, they don't move and they don't make any noise. So that will be the challenge for them, is to be still. But the other dimension of it is that it's created by an artist. So an artist's mind has created this image to say something about what this place, and it will be in the faces of the people, is usually what I say. So, you know, think about what the artist is trying to create, and then that will make your face will start to reflect that thought, and the eyes, you know, what this person is thinking about as they're going through this experience. And that's usually, I think you'll back me up on this bit, that's usually at the point at which you get the real quality, where they're not playing anymore. Now they're really trying to imagine themselves in that circumstance, and the things that they've written and the things that they've thought about have an effect.
And I feel like I've said this in every group that I've been in the last few weeks with you, Tim, but I'm going to say it again to this group. I've done a complete, is it a 180 or a 360? 180, because I'm now going the other direction on this, because I used to suggest to teachers that they don't give children long, that they do that countdown quite quickly and go for the aesthetic in these moments. But I've watched Tim, and I've really seen the value in the loose first reaction, and the reason I see the value in it is, well, there's lots of things we could talk about for hours, but what happens when the second part comes and the teacher asks for that, you know, stillness, and it brings the convention, reminds the children what the convention is and brings that in, is the quality of the work is much better, because they've worked out, they've had their fun, they've leapt all over each other. These children have been sitting for a while, being quite somber. So that opportunity to kind of play out. And again, I've had the privilege of being in the group with the children, and it wasn't in this drama, it was in another one. I was so enjoying the playing, that if you'd rushed me, I wouldn't have got as much learning out of it. So I've now completely changed my mind about this. I think the playful loose bit, where I'm looking across the room at Tim going, I think you've lost them, Tim. Oh, you're doing this bit on purpose. It's such an important, but yeah, Lisa's smiling and laughing, because it feels like that a little bit. It feels like the boys are all leaping on top of each other, thumping each other, or dying horrific deaths. Everybody's got a big grin on their face. What happened to this beautiful solemnity we had? But then you know that you can bring that in. So yeah, that's the backup you're talking about, hey Tim? I've seen it time and time again.
Right. Yeah. It's, I think of it as drafting now. They're through play, they're creating different drafts, different ideas, playing with ideas, which will then become the final product when they, or the final thing. I don't want to call it a product. It's not a product. It's a thing. It's a representation of that, of their ideas. But the playful bit is part of an important, essential part of the process. If you cut that short or you don't do it, you don't give it full expression.
And I think I've always thought that they were somehow taking the mickey out of the ideas if they started getting loose and having big grins on their face. But it isn't that. It isn't that. And, you know, some children are going to go straight into it very seriously, but others have got that in them to kind of get through and explore and play is a really, I don't need to explain it to someone like Dana who's gone, but it's a really valid and important learning process, the play part. So we're leaving room for that. So yeah, I've really appreciated watching that, Tim. Thank you.
And I think that you've just turned yourself off, Viv. You've just muted yourself, Viv.
Sorry, it's not written in the book, that idea of play, but it's so crucial that it's good to mention it. Right. You know, you're not going to see in the key, I'll give them long enough to play, but it's something that we can talk about in these webinars a little bit. I'll stop now.
But I think there's also another dimension of this which I really appreciate now, is the physicality of it. And it seems to be especially important to boys. I don't really want to say it's just boys, because girls do it as well, but it seems being able to sort of grab each other and rough and tumble and physically be together seems to be a really important. We were stood in that classroom in I can't remember where we were in. It was in New Zealand somewhere, where the boys were doing a sort of they were creating a settlement, weren't they? And there was all this play fighting going on. And it was really physical, really, because they were rugby players, weren't they? A lot of them, and they were sort of big physical lads who were used to sort of playing rugby. And so when they were doing this sort of, it was a battle, wasn't it? It was a battle between two warring tribes, and they were very, very physical, but it was never out of control. You know, it had a sort of a kind of dancing quality to it. It was remarkable, really, and I think. Yeah, that classrooms are quite sterile places, aren't they? Particularly as children get older, they tend to spend most of their time sitting down, apart from when they're out at play or doing PE or something. And I think that's, you know, Lisa, when you know your class, you know, they're you work with year 4s, don't you? So they're a bit older, but they like, don't they? I remember the not just the one that we just done with ancient Egypt when we did the earthquake. That there was, you know, they were just kind of on top of each other, weren't they? And kind of physical. Yeah. Right, crack on. So that's step 7. Step 8. So one of the ways that I like to give feedback now is to, while they're in their image, you know, in their engraving, is to kind of walk around and either notice. So it looks here as if a child is ready to drop. I wonder how long they've been down here in the dark. And to use that voice, which is to look at what they're doing and then to comment on it. Or, and this is my preferred option now, to use a kind of narrator voice. The darkness down in the mine was so all-encompassing that no one could see them, but they knew each other were there. And the sounds that they made, and the occasional candle that came down with the carriages, and just actually relate it as if it's a story while they're in the image. And it seems to work really beautifully as a way of kind of capturing the atmosphere, the aesthetic, as we've.
I think it does lift it into the aesthetic, and I mean Lisa can talk about this too, because I saw her do it too. Yeah, but what it does, I think, is they make an offer physically with their bodies, and you it's like you saying, I see your beautiful thing and I will lift it into these words, and then they kind of rise into that. I see them kind of go even more into it when they hear their story coming back at them, because it's like we're making something aesthetic together. So it's a terrible word for it, but it's a management technique or a focusing technique, because it just takes it so seriously. Whereas if you were saying, oh, look at Johnny's lovely facial expression, he's really doing a lovely job there, you're sort of saying the same thing, but you've kind of diminished the aesthetic and made it a classroom conversation. So yeah, I am totally going to use this forever, having seen it a few times over the last few weeks. I think it's reasonably hard to do on the hoof. I'd be really interested in your thoughts on this, Lisa, because I know you do it, this narrator voice over there thing, but they're working hard. They're standing there working hard, they're trying, so you can meet that. And if they hear you stumble a little bit, that's okay, isn't it? Because you're making an effort too. You use the say, Lisa.
Yeah, sorry, yes. It's really interesting because it kind of centers all of them, especially those groups who are still stuck in play a little bit and they're not taking it seriously. When you're complimenting someone but putting that then into the story, you see the shift in the child as well. You see them, oh, I'm in this story and I'm being made a part of this. And their physicality changes and they're fully immersed in it. But you notice the other children in the room as well. They want that moment to shine as well. So they really focus on getting the face right, as Tim likes to say, and getting the frame right. And see, getting that, it increases the quality for everyone in the classroom, I think.
I think some people would say theatre arrives in the room. You know, it's theatrical. John would.
I would say it's putting the artist alongside the children as artists, and it's really respectful of their work. It is it's upgrading and focusing, and also joining in as artists alongside them, which I think says a lot if the teacher does that.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Amy? Are you finding it easier to improvise with the narrator voice as you practice?
It's something I'm still working on. It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I am feeling more confident with it, but it is on my my practice list.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something. Yeah, I know that both you and the others, you're sort of writing down, aren't you, your narrations and practicing the language in the planning stage. And then the more you do that, and then you get as you keep trying it. I mean, the children will, you know, they'll respect the effort, I think. You know, they always sort of, you know, you could sort of see them. And I often sort of say, you know, I'm not sure I got that right. How did you feel about that? Was that all right? I did my best. And they like that, don't they? I mean, who doesn't? Because it's a kind of a respectful thing, isn't it? It comes back to
and your stem you often use, which I think is very Dorothy, is you say, here is one who, which isn't the storyteller voice quite, is it?
Not quite.
But storyteller voice is more, and so I say, and so, and then sort of words follow. Right. But the here is one who isn't a bad middle ground. It's starting to describe what you're seeing. Right. But that's more of a sort of facilitator voice. But yeah, marvelous stuff. And Amy, when I watched you do it with Amelia Earhart the other day, I turned around to Tim and I said, "Oh, she's way better at this than I am." So I think you're pretty good at it. It's a good skill to practice, that's for sure.
Yeah. Right. And on. So step 9. While they're still representing the picture, ask the students to think ahead. This is about adding some element of tension at this point. So in this one, because we've been thinking about the exterior in the piece of writing, people were bringing the interior, but we've gone exterior again. We've gone to the look of the faces and what the different people are doing. So this kind of returns it back to the interior. So the kind of the piece of tension that I'm introducing here is this idea of hope. So I wondered what they hoped for. Did they even have hope? Or did they think this was always going to be like this for them, for people like them, as it had been for their mothers and their fathers before them? And that's again, this is one of these things that Dorothy used to do, is a kind of sort of moment of sort of dropping it down into the what she called the universal, which is that our lives are not the same as theirs, thankfully, but we all know what it is to have hope, or perhaps not to have hope, and that's the kind of a connecting emotion, really, and of course attention. And also, of course, it's also foreshadowing the curriculum that they're going to be studying over the next term, which is to do with the Earl of Shaftesbury and the report that was written as a result of these investigations, and the laws that changed to protect children from working in terrible conditions like this. So then to then walk around, and as you walk around, this is the children can voice the thoughts of the people that are working in the mine. So that if I was doing this, I'd probably have another practice. So go back to sort of rehearsing this, talking in groups, refining those bits of writing that they were doing earlier, and in preparation for this. And then when they were ready to go back, and either back to the same images that they created before or new ones, if they wanted to look at something new. And then as I walk past, this is a piece of theatre. As you walk past someone, that activates them to speak. And then they say something as you come, so you sort of walking slowly around. And this is like voices in the dark. So that's that step. And then the last step is to go, in terms of the circle of progression, is to come round to the reflective part of the inquiry. So it's to step out at this point, and everybody's come out of the images, and then to reflect on all kinds of things I suppose they would want to reflect on. But one of the things that Viv and I are very keen on, and this is something that Viv really taught me, was to, who are the voices that we can't hear? Who are the people that are not being represented? Who are those who are haven't been in our thoughts so far? And of course the implications of this, and then you can also look at I always forget what it's called, Viv. I always call it the principle of charity, but it's not, is it? It's the, what did she call it? The grace element. So is there, because the children, especially children of this sort of age, think about goodies and baddies. So the owner of the mine is going to be a baddie, in their minds, and often depicted in films and books as evil characters. But is there anything, can we say anything generous about the owner? Is there anything, people are very rarely the baddies of their own stories. So what would the mine owner say about him, sending children down into the mines? What would he say? So I'll open that up just as a little kind of
takes us to a whole other set of keys, doesn't it?
Yeah, another one. But
keys, yeah. I think we did that the last time we used this too. We ended up encountering someone so that we could find out whether there was a grace element. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the whole key. I won't spend any time doing that, actually, because of we haven't got a huge amount of time left. I just wanted to show you this photograph. This is a picture. They each of the children had a strip of paper like that, and they each drew their own part of the mine, what was going on in their part of the mine, and then they put them together to create the mine. And that I've done that hundreds of times, and it works brilliantly. You just have everybody has their own bit, and then you put them together, and then suddenly you've got this whole story going on. And drawing for children is such an important part of their learning, part of the processing of learning. obviously.
Yeah. It's not in the key, but you
No.
slotted it in at the point before they went up and
Yeah.
made the
Yeah.
still images, and it really informed those still images, so we can always stick a bit of drawing in.
Yeah, it's just kind of an extra bit, and it's another key as well. But this, and then you can see here in this image the picture that was on the board, and then their drawings underneath. There's some of their drawings, and then on the left side you can see Sarah, who was the teacher, working with the students, and she had them sitting on the floor with their clipboards. That was how they were doing their writing. And then there was one of the students was representing the trapper. So there was some sort of thinking around what her thoughts are. And then, right, so very, very quickly, this bit, there's a couple of bits of writing I'd like to share with you that were written by a class of year 6. So they're bit older, 11 and 12, but doing this sequence, and just some absolutely fantastic bits of writing that I just thought you'd enjoy having a quick look at, and the quality of the use of particularly the dramatic imagination, you know, the darkness and light, the sound and silence and movement, stillness. And I've done this context, I've lost, I can't remember, dozens and dozens of times, and it nearly always produces some of the best writing that children do, because it's evocative. They can empathize, but it also allows them to write in this very descriptive way. So that's that one. Here's another one.
I love this one. It's got the word bewilderness in it, the black bewilderness of the minds. I just love that. If that wasn't already a word, it deserves to be.
Yeah. Thin, tired children crawling on their swollen, blistered hands and grazed, bleeding knees. That's just so evocative, isn't it? It's just absolutely astonishing. The deathly blackness wins the battle as the last positive yellow beam of golden light vanishes into pure sooty blackness. It's fantastic, isn't it? Brilliant writing. And another little bit. This is, I met a young girl called Alice. She told me a bit about her life and family. She also said that when you need to evacuate the mines, adults always go first, then the children, if they have enough time, also, Alice said. Yeah. So, just in summary, I don't want to keep you too long. These are some of the benefits of this key. It brings history alive and allows the students to experience some of what life is at that moment. There's built-in features that ensure a sense of distance and protection from difficult and raw topics. This distance and protecting children into these experiences are an important part of the way that we wrote the keys. Does not use simulation to pretend the context is real or expect students to act out events or pretend to be people from the past. And that's the use of the convention. They're not pretending or acting out. Instead, it supports a brief experience of an enactment at the start of the inquiry, as a starting point of inquiry. Can be used at any point during a history study to enhance the student's understanding. So in this example, it's very much the early stages. That in fact, this is an introduction for that, but it could be used at other points in a history study. Then there's some limitations. So we can't know what it was like to be another person in the history, but history and art and film and, you know, books and literature, everything relies on our faculty to imagine, to empathize, to be able to imagine what it might be like for us or might be like for them. Of course, you can't know that. We don't know what it was like. And you know, I've never been down a mine. I don't. John, have you ever been down a mine? Have you been down? Right.
Yes, I have. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I was at Newcastle, we had a day out into a mine. I got as far as the bit where it was about 2 foot high, and everybody else crawled through, not me. I
No.
waited for them to come back. I couldn't do it.
I'm with you, John. Can't be doing that.
No, I've never been down a mine, but I can imagine what it would be like to be in a hard, cold place with all that earth above you, all that weight above you pressing down. And but I can only imagine, and I don't want to take myself there really, what it must be like to be a child in that total darkness for 12 hours. That's beyond. I mean, I all I can do is empathize with that.
Can I quickly say one more thing?
Yes, please.
It's about the legacy of moving into the here and now. That here, you will know what Thatcher did to the mining communities in the, you know, whenever that was. But I work in Nottingley, which is they put the mining families there in order that they could take them away from Orgreave, for example, and put them there. And the children are struggling still in those communities, as are the families.
Yeah.
So I feel a bit radical about that.
So they may not be down the mines anymore, but they're still trapped.
Still
And
down the mine.
they're still
They're still
used
down
for
the mine.
these purposes in a way. Children are still being, trapped.
And again, not to get too political about it, but it was the way that those communities were broken up, their livelihood was taken away from them. That was the brutal thing. There's a documentary, isn't there, that I haven't seen yet, but my dad was telling me about. Have you seen it? Have you seen it, John? That it's a new documentary. It's I think it's on iPlayer, but anyway, again, so now there may be some sensitive moments that are not suitable for dramatic inquiry. Viv, did you want to talk a tiny little bit about that?
Oh, I think we're always aware that there are some things that they kind of belong to the people who had those experiences, and we talk about that quite a lot in the New Zealand workshop that we had earlier today. But in New Zealand, we have the tapu and the noa, we have the sacred and the profane, and we wouldn't be working with sort of things that are sacred and from Māori history. And although we might not use those terms, I was once asked in a drama to imagine that I was a little child who'd just been crushed in a mine fall, and I didn't appreciate it, and B, I just didn't think it was quite appropriate. So there are certain moments that perhaps we're not going to, and we're going to have to feel that for ourselves, or speak to cultural mentors or people who do have sovereignty over those stories about whether that's okay. Yeah.
And then the importance of that last step in critical reflection and looking at the people whose voices rarely get heard. So this is the planning page that we briefly talked about earlier, and on the website. And this is a look forward to the next planning session, which is on the 3rd of March, which will be looking at Key 5 starter story.